बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। आज हमारा ये इंटर्नशिप का लास्ट डे है और अगले साल इंशाअल्लाह ताला फिर कोशिश करेंगे कि यही प्रोग्राम दोबारा शुरू करें। आज हमारे साथ मेरे बहुत ख़ास दोस्त सफ़ी कुरैशी शामिल हैं और सफ़ी, I've known Safi since 35 years from Los Angeles. He's a highly noted name in the USA and elsewhere. He's been the advisor to several American presidents, and he's a great entrepreneur. He started something called AST Research, जो AST Computers थे आज से 30-40 साल पहले जो आए थे। एंड देन सफ़ी का जो मैंने एवोल्यूशन देखा over the last 35-40 years, mashallah, he's gone into so many philanthropic activities जो आज हम इनसे ये खुद बताएंगे कि पूरी दुनिया में एजुकेशन पे तवज्जो दे रहे हैं, हेल्थ पे दे रहे हैं, and so many other initiatives. So that's why we've invited him. We are delighted to have him. Safi, assalamu alaikum.
वालेकुम सलाम, वालेकुम सलाम।
How are you? कैसे हैं आप?
अल्लाह का बड़ा शुक्र है, अल्लाह का बड़ा शुक्र है। I'm glad all of you guys are well.
Thank you for keeping awake at 11 a.m. and p.m. in Los Angeles and talking to us. And ये बैठे हुए हमारे साथ तीन यूनिवर्सिटीज़ के MJA Comsats और Nust के आर्किटेक्चर स्टूडेंट्स, और फिर ये obviously रिकॉर्ड भी हो रहा है for posterity. I hope it benefits many other people. Your talk, how you think, how you've lived your life. It's just something from a storybook. Amazing life, mashallah. So I'll hand over the mic to you, Safi, and you can start off any time.
मेरी जिंदगी में one of the most important thing I have learned is that मैं इस वक्त यहाँ पे आप लोगों से बात कर रहा हूँ, I'm here because of my early failures, and someday I can give you more details about what the failures led to me where I am today. And मुराद से, मुराद की बीवी से जब मेरी मुलाकात हुई, it was part of a tragedy in my life. So tragedy brings us together. So you never know how people will come into my life. My life's journey has been a full roller coaster. I have seen every ups and downs, highs and lows. तो मैं बस अल्लाह का शुक्र अदा करता हूँ क्योंकि the life that I have lived, most families, most marriages break up. And that seems to be the ratio. और मैं काफ़ी इंजीनियर हूँ, डेटा ड्रिवन हूँ, तो मैं देखता हूँ डिवोर्स रेट दुनिया भर में बढ़ता जा रहा है। And there is no easy answers for it. So I feel extremely lucky to have survived every ups and downs, and we can be still together and reflect on life. But most important, I want to always look forward. So I have a very good idea of my life almost 50 years ago. From my teenage years, I was curious. My father worked for a foreign office. Even though he did not travel much, मगर उनके जो दोस्त थे वो दुनिया भर में फिरते थे, and I used to hear stories about Kenya, about other places where his colleagues have been. So it has been an interesting journey. So if you go back and look at in the 70s, whatever the predictions were by the brightest minds, चाहे वो ऑक्सफोर्ड में हो, कैम्ब्रिज में हो, MIT में हो, स्टैनफोर्ड में हो, every one of the expert predictions from that period is totally wrong. So it has been a great looking at the predictions made by the smartest people. So nobody really knows the future. We all pontificate. And जिन लोगों के पास knowledge होती है, they somehow get unfair opportunity to talk about the future. So I have had just an amazing opportunity to be where I am, and failures have brought me here. I don't have any other explanation. Along the way, I have been very lucky. तो आज मैं इस सेशन के लिए जो तैयारी कर रहा था, one of my greatest friends, जो दोस्त है, वो किताबें हैं, ये किताबें यहाँ रखी हुई हैं on every topic. तो मुराद मैं आज ऑफिस गया, अनीता के साथ हम लोग कुछ काम कर रहे थे, So she saw me taking picture of मेरे ऑफिस की कॉन्फ्रेंस में, छोटी सी कॉन्फ्रेंस रूम, उसमें 3 बुक शेल्फ हैं, उसकी मैंने तस्वीर ली। तो कहती है, आर यू गोइंग टू गिव अवे द बुक्स? मैंने कहा नहीं, ये मैं अपनी मेमोरी के लिए कि मेरे पास कौन सी किताबें ऑफिस में हैं, कौन सी किताबें घर में हैं। तो वन ऑफ द suggestions I have for you as young people कि how do you find, मैं काफी नए लोगों से मिलता हूँ पहली दफा, they all come with whatever education, whatever their background is, and आपके इस ग्रुप में I'm very happy to see there are so many females, so many girls there, but in still many parts of the business world which is male dominated, तो जो business meeting शुरू होती है, everybody is trying to impress everybody else, और जो मैंने तरकीब सोची है, in a brand new meeting I start talking about books. तो मैं लोगों से पूछता हूँ कि वो क्या पढ़ रहे हैं। तो उसके 2 बड़े रीजन हैं। By anybody who's investing time in reading a book, that book must be important. अच्छा, and they would love to talk about कि वो क्या पढ़ रहे हैं. More important than what they're reading, I find out their background. So this is the most skillful way to find, because people don't invest hours based on their interest. So science में, history में, politics में, I can find out very quickly about a brand new human being that I'm meeting for the first time by using books as a way to engage in a brand new conversation. And most Americans, very senior executives, are surprised because they said no business starts talking about books. And this is my practice, that somewhere in the conversation, I'll ask and what books they're reading, and then I will share with them based on what books I'm reading. So as Murad had asked me to share a little bit of background, so I came to America for a very, very specific reason, just to be an electrical engineer. That was my passion since I was 7, 8, or 9. और मेरे यहाँ पे कोई जानने वाला नहीं था. I had no plans to stay in America. I would have gone back to Pakistan. But as life has its own journeys, I ended up staying. And I was able to meet people that really helped me form a good team. So one of the key things, to Pakistan से मैंने 3 चीजें सीखी. There is a lot of things I learned from my father, who had a very amazing temperament. He was more educated than I am, but a very down-to-earth person. My mother, actually my father, I may have mentioned to Murad, my father worked with President Musharraf's father for more than 40 years. They knew each other. They joined the Foreign Office in Delhi in 1945, 43, somewhere like there. My mother knew President Musharraf's mother before either one of them were married. So these were all, they knew each other in Delhi. And of course, then they all moved to Pakistan. And we've kind of stayed in touch with them. So the things I learned from my father, the things I learned from my mother, and then Pakistan gave me a certain freedom, certain independence as a young country. So in America, I was able to start a computer company with 2 other people who were both from Hong Kong. And we were all pretty regular electrical engineers. None of us went to Stanford or Harvard or MIT. But together as a team, we could do amazing things. So I always remind myself and others that life is a team sport. Whether you look at your family, whether you look at it's always a team sport. Now, you may have a leader in a sports team, but even I use religious examples. So, अगर आप Prophet Muhammad की example देखें, so he built his, he had the core team. He could migrate to Yathrib, which is now Medina, and execute. He had the message from the Creator, but he still needed a team with different strength. Hazrat Usman's strength was different, Abu Bakr was different, Hazrat Ali was different. All of them brought Hazrat unique value to the Prophet's team. And I look at most of my endeavors, it has never been individual, it's been a team sport. And luckily, my 2 partners were from Hong Kong. We had nothing in common about language, culture, mazhab, kuch common nahi tha, the food preferences, except we were engineers who knew how to define a good product. Most of you or all of you are architects. You know how to define a good building. You guys can see it. I may not be able to tell the difference, but you have the eye, you have the sense to appreciate beauty of architecture, the functionality of it. So I had a chance to listen for 90 minutes to the session number 9 that you had with Professor Hasanuddin Khan. And I learned a lot from his journey and the kind of things that you guys create that brings tears, that brings joy, and that brings the wonder of nature and the creation to fellow human beings. So I have been just fortunate to build trustful team with people that really did not know my background or I did not know their background. So I have been extremely lucky that I trust people till they lose their trust. मेरे साथ बहुत से लोग काम करते हैं, including my own family member. For them, people have to earn the trust. Two different way of looking at life. So I think for me, trusting people has worked. Yes, people have disappointed me. People do these things. So trust has allowed us to work. And in my early technology career, in 1984, on the Wall Street in America, there was no such thing as a brown person as a CEO, founder of a company. But I felt, even though I looked different, my name was different, my name was, Islam was not very well known back in the 80s, but I could engage with the Wall Street people because they are very, very practical. So I have been extremely fortunate to be in situations where uh, I found myself, I was the only brown person, immigrant American, with a totally different set of experiences, but being able to engage in whatever was being discussed. Was it business? Was it politics? Was it something else? So uh, at 33, 34, I was one of our younger CEOs on Wall Street. And the interesting thing that I've shared with some of my close friends, Kay, coming from Pakistan back in the 70s, in many ways was the way people look at Israel today. Pakistan was a totally young country with no colonial baggage. So that gave me a sense of freedom that forever I'm grateful to Pakistan. अच्छा मेरे जो partners थे, Albert and Tom, they were more experienced than me. They grew up in Hong Kong. But because they grew up in Hong Kong, they had this view that the way the British were running Hong Kong when they were young, that had left an image. So I could deal with Americans of all backgrounds on behalf of AST, my first computer company, with a great deal of ease and comfort, not in arrogance, but be able to deal with them. So uh, the business journey has allowed me to engage when you reach a certain size in America. So in our final stage, we were about 2.7 billion a year in revenue. We had 6,000 people around the world. And when you reach a certain size, even in America, you have to engage with Washington. So I was active in Washington just to be able to understand how things affects large companies. So was very lucky to travel to different parts of the world, China, India, Indonesia, Thailand, with American officials. And it was an interesting experience traveling with an American official going to the different countries. Uh, but so that was the exposure that has allowed to kind of look at life in a much broader sense. So yes, I love business, I love technology, but that is kind of the uh, less interesting part of where I am in my life's journey. So I look at all of you. You are the future of this planet. So it's 11 p.m. California time, but that is normal to me. The most time I spend in the US, other than work, is mentoring other people, mentoring kids Hispanic background, African American, whatever. So it's really that is the interesting part of the things. I took some notes just for this conversation. How many of you guys have studied archaeology, or you really like archaeology as architects? I'm interested in archaeology because I look at how did humans evolve. So when I look at today's open capitalist system, my biggest lesson was forming in my mind till the COVID hit. And I saw the people around the world, the haves and the have-nots. Many of us could work on Zoom and continue to do our business, but there were, even in America, there were about 10 to 15% of the people who could not work on Zoom. They were bus drivers and train drivers and security guards. And the stress in their lives really kind of reinforced the inequality that I see in so many societies. So in looking at how does technology, how does all the things that you do. So Murad and I have shared some articles about very, very, very affordable housing, because that is a big need globally. How do you use bamboo? How do you use other things to look at these things? So one of the key things I will recommend, this is a book that came out about 5 years ago. I do not know if you can see these things. The Dawn of Everything. So they're looking at human evolution through architecture, including, they talk about Mohenjo-daro. If any of you studied Mohenjo-daro, has somebody studied Mohenjo-daro? So if you look at it, the beauty of archaeology is that by looking at the layout of that city, the sizes of houses of different groups and the public spaces, you can understand what level of income inequality, how many layers are there of them. There, in every society, there are well-off people with big houses, and there are middle-class houses, and where do the poor live? So just looking at the old archaeology in different parts of the world, we can see that the income inequality that we are seeing today is much, much wider. And I love open markets. Capitalism has been good for me, but I see the dark side of capitalism. And that's really where religion, morality, ethics comes in. How do you create a safety network? How do you look after your fellow human beings? Because in the eyes of most religions, we are created equal. But the capitalistic, meritocratic world, we know that some people have better brains, can have better families and everything. And one of the most interesting things, Murad, I have been asked over the years in America by people visiting from Pakistan or India, the key thing they wanted to know my father and grandfather, because there is assumption that if I'm doing well, then I must have come from a connected family which had resources. But unfortunately, that was not the case. So uh, in my family, from my father's side, we had an education surplus. We didn't have much money, but there was high education. All of my father's sisters, except one, my mother's side, all the girls, they had gone to college of some type of another, except one. So I grew up in an education-rich environment, uh, not with much wealth, not with much connections. Uh, and then America allowed me. How many of you guys know the value of oxygen? So we all know we all need oxygen. Every living thing needs oxygen, right? But I always look for analogies. So if you look at I equate money to oxygen. Yes, we need a certain amount of money, just like we need a certain amount of oxygen. But for all of you in a healthy environment, if you are put in an environment of 100% oxygen, that is not good for your body. And I equate money the same way, that in current society globally, money is being overvalued, thinking that money will bring you a certain amount of prestige, happiness, but money loses its value rather quickly. And fortunately, I have gone through every cycle of money. I do not know, Murad, how many people know Bank of America in the US, which is one of the large banks. So Bank of America, and I love history, I love how things are formed. Bank of America was founded by an Italian American who came more than 100 years ago to America. And his name was A.P. Giannini. He had started a successful bank in Italy. He migrated, he came to California. And the interesting thing about, again, human societies, and I see that universally, we form tribes, we want to discriminate against each other because of color, language, ethnicity, religion. So Italian immigrants in California more than 100 years ago were into farming, but they could not get loans to start buying the seeds. So Bank of America founder A.P. Giannini was the first guy to reach those group that was underserved. You might remember, some of you, 1906, San Francisco had one of the worst earthquakes in the history of California, maybe history of America. And the fires created so many. But A.P. Giannini, Bank of America, opened up a branch with a table because they said to keep the businesses running, you have to be open. And so I did business with Bank of America many years ago, and the bankers gave me a book by their founder, A.P. Giannini. And as you read that book, he says, A.P. Giannini, as soon as his net worth became 1 million, he will give away all the excess. His view was that if you have more than 1 million, then the money owns you as opposed to you owning the money. And you have to think about that concept, that if you look at extremely successful, extremely rich people, and if somebody is approaching them, they're always asking, oh, why is this guy approaching me? He wants something from me. So being very rich is like being a very beautiful girl. They do not know why people are approaching. Is that for their beauty or they like them as a person? You can't tell the difference. So again, those are the kind of lessons over the years, having gone through all these cycles of highs and lows I've seen. Uh, what do you guys know about a mirror? Have you guys use mirror every day? So mirror comes in different sizes, right? You can go to a circus and there could be a mirror that distorts the images, right? So, but most of us in everyday life, we use mirror to give us a true reflection when we are standing in front of a mirror. So a mirror does not lie to us. And I use the mirror analogy that most of us need a human mirror to be able to tell us who we are, because when we become very successful, we become very, very shrewd, we become very, very cunning with the choice of words that we use. And for many of us, the best human mirror is your spouse or a good friend or somebody who does not have any other interest in you other than giving you good feedback. And I have learned in much later in life that I have to ask my wife for feedback about myself, because we can become so slick that in trying to manipulate the opinion, we are also fooling ourselves. So I encourage that every one of us should have a human mirror that can tell us who we really are. And if you use the example of a mirror, uh, each human, many of us, we both have a dark side to us and a blind side to us. The blind side is what is happening behind me. You guys can see what is happening behind me. I cannot see. I can only see forward. So a human mirror helps you understand the surrounding and give you feedback. Uh, the dark side each of us have, that's where spirituality comes in. And I find tremendous comfort in looking at other than material things, which are very necessary, and the worldly wisdom. uh, I have been always attracted to the Sufi side of Islam. Yes, please go ahead. So money is not the necessary initial ingredient. So initial ingredient really is an idea of entrepreneur for a new medicine, for a new type of housing, for a new type of a product. And the world is really built on ideas. If you look at the patent system that got developed in the West over the last few centuries, so we reward people who come up with innovative breakthrough ideas about medicine, about genetics, about anything. Having said that, then at a certain point in time, you need to raise funds. Now, because all three of us were immigrants, we really did not know how to raise funds. None of us had an MBA, none of us had any business education. So in America, the oldest way to start a business is you borrow against your house. And we, each of us did that. We went to the local bank because as our business started growing, we needed funds to build inventory, to buy parts and things like that, because we were in a very material intensive, money intensive hardware business. So it is always ideas. Now, having idea is important, but then you still have to communicate that idea, build a team, come up with a plan. And in America, the unique thing about Silicon Valley is failure is not considered bad. In every part of the world that I've been to, when any of us have had a failure, we will try to hide that failure with explanations. Well, my business failed because of interest rates, because of a war somewhere, something else. But America is the only place where people will ask you, well, in that failure, when you started a company, what did you learn? And how do you learn from that failure lesson to move forward? So capital is important, but today we have angel investors. So because there is examples of so many successful companies that people are able to raise funds, rather if on the credibility of the team and the uniqueness of the idea, and how do you execute that idea? What is the timeline for executing that idea? Is it in months and years? So I have invested in startups that are in medicine, started by some very brilliant Pakistani doctor, but for them, their innovation takes years for the approval. So different investors, different people have appetite for that thing. If you look at Elon Musk, that I had a chance to meet many times, he's into space. He's an amazingly brilliant guy pushing the things. So if you look at the private space program, it is very, very active in America. In most countries, the space program is controlled by the government. So please go ahead. Other question. Otherwise, I think economy plays uh, a name. किसी चीज का भी बीज है. So the beej is the starting point. Beej has the DNA of that fruit or that vegetable or anything. But what do you do with the seed? You try to find fertile soil. Then you try to provide water. Initially, you provide little water, but as the tree grows, it needs more water. So there are so many analogies that we can learn from nature. And back on my love for looking at the Sufi approach. So Sufis have a way of saying how much we can learn from a tree. अगर आप बड़े से दरख्त को देखें with a big canopy, a tree gives its shade to anybody and everybody without asking कि तुम्हारा मजहब क्या है, जानवर को, इंसान को. तो Sufi say, how can we be like a tree? कि हमारा जो shadow है, it is helping humanity, everything living, doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter उनका मजहब क्या है. So you can learn so much from a tree. दूसरी बात सूफी कहते हैं कि look at a tree जिसके अंदर एक दरख्त जिसमें कोई फल नहीं है और दूसरा दरख्त है loaded with fruit जिसमें फल लगे हुए हैं. तो वो दरख्त क्या होता है जिसमें फल बहुत से लगे हुए होते हैं, वो जो दरख्त फल जिसपे लगे हुए वो झुक जाता है. तो सूफी कहते हैं कि अगर अल्लाह ने तुम्हें कुछ वो दिया है, how do you become a neighbor? कहते हैं कि tree without anything is arrogant standing up, but a tree loaded with fruit bows down to make its fruit available to animals and birds and humans alike. I think AI will have an important impact, and there is अमेरिका में, यूरोप में, हर जगह पे बड़ी moral debates हो रही हैं about the dark side of AI and the fake news and all the different things it will do. मेरे लिहाज से where I am asking everybody in my core team, in my daily activities, how do I use today's tools of AI to make myself more efficient? Because Murad may know, may not know, Murad, I am living in overtime. My father did not live as long as I'm living. So to me, for most of us, we don't may realize most valuable thing is time, not money. And how do you use that time? So I believe AI will have a huge impact on new drug discovery, so many other things. But just like any technology, everything is a double-edged sword. There is always a dark side and a bright side. Same thing with education. So sometimes we give too much value to pure education. And again, I read history a lot. If you look at the First World War and the Second World War, the most educated nation on the planet were the Germans. And then I spent a lot of time in Japan, and what kind of behavior those most educated people can do. So with technology and education, you can become a more ruthless killer. So education doesn't guarantee humanity, doesn't guarantee caring for your fellow human being. That's where the moral values come from in most places. Ethics comes from most religions, which are always talking about. So when I sometimes quite a few regular engagement with my fellow Americans who are mostly Christian, मैं उनसे ये कहता हूँ कि if Jesus came to visit us here, will he be surprised, be upset that we are spending more money on Christmas giving gift? Because if you look at most of the religions, they are always to protect the underdog. आप human history देख लें, powerful people. They knew how to control information, they had access to the laws, they knew how to manipulate the system. So AI has huge potential, but I went to a conference a year ago in Silicon Valley, and I learned that there is such scarcity of people who are knowledgeable about AI. So even the companies, they're still learning the potential, what can be done, what cannot be done. So this is the arms race between all the big companies that most of us know in the Western world, but I believe something similar is happening in China. So you have this race to harness, and then it is not just AI. So you read about quantum computing, very, very early stages. Supposedly, it can solve things much faster, much more efficiently. So it will create new challenges. So technology will keep move forward. I worry about how does it help the people, average people. So one of my personal questions to all of you is कि in आपकी ordinary जिंदगी में are there things that brings tears to your eyes everyday life के अंदर? I will share with you what brings tears to my eyes. Many times I can sit and watch somebody eat their food, whether it's a human or an animal. When I see somebody, I'm just mesmerized that for that human being, this plate of food, roti, kebab, jo bhi hai, it will give this body nourishment for the next 12, 14 hours. And it brings both tears and I feel very happy. Because I look at most of you, we are so fortunate कि हमें अगले खाने की फिक्र नहीं होती कि अगला खाना कहाँ से आएगा. As we are having this conversation, there are probably about 1 billion people in the world. उनको नहीं पता होता कि अगला खाना कब से मिलेगा. And so when I see nourishment going into anything living, I can just watch with enjoyment, tears coming out. Okay, chalo, it's this thing. And I'll tell you a personal story. My last visit to India was in 2007, Murad. There was some conference. I went to Mumbai, and two interesting things happened in that visit. First, in my comment, I was part of a panel, and there was a Frenchman who introduced me. He said, "Oh, Safi is just from Pakistan. He's just flew from Pakistan. Tell us." So this was all an IT, very educated, very well-off audience in Mumbai. And I asked them, I said, do you know what is the most popular thing in Afghanistan? This is 2007. Manika, what I learned in my trip in a short stay in Karachi, the biggest business in Kabul, in Afghanistan those days, was artificial legs, because Afghanis were still blowing up from the butterfly mines that the Russians had dropped during the first Afghan war from 79 to 88. So just kind of sharing data information about our surrounding people, our neighborhood, global neighborhood. दूसरी चीज Murad, I went usually go out for a walk at night time, staying in some nice hotel. There is this waterfront in Mumbai. तो मुझे एक दिखाई दिया. I saw a dog, a hungry dog. अच्छा, now I'm wrestling कि ये भूखा है. What do I do? मेरी जेब में कुछ पैसे थे, and I'm wrestling. I'm trying to overanalyze in my brain. Within 5 minutes, I saw an old lady, very humble. She picked up something, उसने cookies निकाल के उस कुत्ते को दिए, and मैंने अल्लाह का शुक्र किया. मैंने कहा कि अल्लाह हर एक का देखने वाला मौजूद है. I am just overanalyzing, and somebody in that community took care of that hungry dog for that few hours. This thing. So again, life humbles me every day. I have been given more than I ever desired, more than I ever deserved, and I'm not taking anything with me. तो मैं कहता हूँ लोगों को कि यार मेरे दिमाग में, मेरे दिल में, मेरी जेब में जो भी है will be taken away from me sooner rather than later. And ये जो discussion है, I want to share whatever, because you are the future. So Murad knows we have a Qabristan है California में, where my daughter is buried many years ago. My mother is buried. तो कब्रिस्तान जाते हैं यहाँ पे for my own peace of mind. तो साल 2 साल पहले I was there with my wife. तो मैंने अनीता से कहा, मैंने कहा अनीता, when I'm gone, आप लोग डिसाइड करें कि what do you want to do with my body. If you choose to bury me next to कब्र पे आपको कुछ लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है. No name, nothing. मैंने कहा if somebody visits me, that's okay. But nobody needs to know कि यहाँ पे कौन है. The world needs to move on. बड़े बड़े 30 मार्खा आ चुके हैं, अलेक्जेंडर आ चुका है, चर्चिल आ चुका है. किसी को नहीं पता. 1000-2000 साल के बाद जो 4-5-6 नाम लोग हम याद रखते हैं ना, वो रसूल अल्लाह का, मूसा का, ईसा का, बुद्धा, ये लोग जो आए थे वो पैसे बनाने के लिए नहीं आए थे, ना कॉन्कर करने के लिए आए थे. If you look at their message independently, they try to make their society a little bit better. बस इसीलिए वो 2000 साल के बाद भी, 1500 साल के बाद भी 1000 लोग उनको जानते हैं. So to me, it's been an amazing journey for me. But I am very optimistic क्योंकि मैंने, in my early journey, what was predicted about the future, all those predictions were wrong. There was no discussion about China or India or Brazil or South Africa. The whole world in the 70s was centered around Europe, America, and Japan. That was the worldview. And I visit China, I've done a lot of these things. And the amount of change they have brought in the last 40 years, never in human history, more people have left poverty. Or so my focus on economic empowerment is Rasulullah ki ek saying hai ki ghurbat jo hai, that makes humans compromise so much. And we saw what happened in some of the countries, especially in Iraq after the first Gulf War. The middle class of Iraq was destroyed because of sanctions, and middle class families were forced to sell their kids. And something like this was happening in Afghanistan 2-2.5 साल पहले. So ghurbat jo hai is one of the things that really makes humans compromise their faith, everything. So my whole thing is कि yes, how do we create more justice, more prosperity, and what all of you guys work on. So I'm passionate about how do you provide more housing to the people. The housing shortage is right here in America, in Canada, in this thing. So it is a global thing. I look at manufactured housing, I look at housing using natural materials, some of the things जो कि floods के बाद Murad and other people were involved in. So those are the things that kind of gets you excited. These are big problems. These are not small problems. But I believe that your generation is much more aware of what's happening in the world. Humans are still can bring into a tribal thing. But I see the young people are more conscious. I see what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Gaza. My wife and I, we were in Japan, in Kyoto last November. And one Friday evening, we saw this demonstration. कहती ये क्या कर रहे हैं? मैंने कहा ये फ़लस्तीन का फ्लैग है, चे गेवारा का फ्लैग है, and of course चारों तरफ पुलिस लगी हुई थी. So the awareness that's happening because of technology, I believe the world will become more and more just. There is no guarantee. The biggest fear I have is of nuclear engagement. So I have had a chance to go visit Hiroshima. I have a chance to visit Nagasaki, and that shows what we as humans are capable of doing. So this is Einstein's reminder. If we don't manage some of these weapons of mass destruction, we can set humanity back. But I remain hopeful. There is always that fear. But how do you create more engagement, more dialogue between peoples and nations and tribes? And Quran में एक saying है कि we made you tribes and different languages so you get to know each other. I don't know कौन सी surah में है, Murad might know these things. So you find words of wisdom about the big picture in so many sources. But Murad, one of the things that this is a very formal session, you guys are all these things, but feel free to send me questions. Some people are shy. So in the future time, any other topics. So this is just a kind of overall discussion about my journey that I have had more experiences than I ever dreamed, and the kind of things that I have had a chance to go through. So it's just I have nothing but grateful, and I look at it in the lottery of life. The biggest thing we have is हम किस family में पैदा हुए थे, and that is the starting point. So that's why I never judge any other human being. मुराद काफी को 20-25 साल पहले when my kids were young, हम लोग ने पाकिस्तान विजिट किया. And my simple message to them कि भाई, you're not visiting Pakistan because of food or something. You can find good food and all these things. Yes, you like to meet relatives. But मैंने अपने बच्चों से कहा कि if you look at these people on the street जो सड़क पे बैठे हुए हैं, तुम मुझे शलवार कमीज पहना दो, you would not be able to tell the difference. You see this young boy who's working on the trash, मैंने कहा there is no difference in that boy जो कि कूड़ा उठा रहा है, कूड़े से बना रहा है, and me. My starting point was different, so I can never compare myself to any other human being. I think that's what I'm grateful to. Pakistan was a young country when I left. So for whatever reason, I was not carrying the colonial baggage that many Indians felt back then. British nahi kiya. So I was born in an independent country. So that gave me tremendous freedom and optimism. What has happened to Pakistan, I feel sad. But there's always a reason. I may not like the reason, I may not understand the reason. So I feel what Pakistan, I will forever be grateful. So, and always giving analogies to Americans, because many can look at early Pakistan as early Israel. These two countries were created based on faith, and we were a fresh country, and we had this optimistic outlook. So even with what's happening in Middle East, I always look for crazy ideas. मैंने कहा कि why can't the Middle East between Israel and Palestinian? I am hoping that within this century they will form a community, common union, just like what happened to the European Union. I always look for analogies. After the First World War and Second World War, between Germans and French and Belgium and British, they created this thing. So I'm always hopeful. I tell my friends that both Arabs and Jews, they're both Semites. We don't have much less of a theological debate with them. It's a small real estate problem. It's not a theological problem. And I'm hopeful. The same way I look at India and Pakistan, I have done my DNA analysis. Most of my DNA is Indian. Yes, my Qureshey name could have come from anybody who converted. So for me to say, oh, I'm an Arab or Persian or Turkish, I'm fooling myself. I have much more in common, language, culture, these things, with fellows from India, or these things, than on the western front of Pakistan. I think, Murad, that is the question many of us think about, wrestle with. But I have never been, I mean, I've not been to Bangladesh ever. But what has happened over there in the last month is amazing. I had friends who would give me update, and Bangladesh GDP had gone higher than India by focusing on education and how they presented themselves. So they have done, and we can always learn from examples. So I wish I had an answer, and I hope that the most strongest institution for you need a very strong economy. This happened in South Korea, that happened in Taiwan, which were all had very strong military leadership because of the history of those countries. So I wish I had the answer, but there are more tools available. And I believe there is an interesting this thing that there are so many institutions, individuals, and countries that don't want Pakistan to fail. So Pakistan, people will say, has been propped up, but that also provides an opening for young people that if any of you are doing innovative work, people will support from purely capitalistic point of view to the non-profit point of view and everything in between. And I'll give you an example. A gentleman that is local, some of you, Murad, might know him. He came to me with a need for insulin because in his family, and he says, so many people, kids in Pakistan cannot buy insulin. And can you donate? And I said, young man, there is insulin shortage in California, everywhere else, but why don't you take on a bigger project? Why don't you start making insulin in Pakistan for the poor people? I had a chance to meet and spend some time with Abdul Edi, and he had a very brilliant mind. So मैंने कहा कि that way, मैंने कहा if you start insulin production, I'll guarantee you, I will help other people. Big foundations will come and help because you know you're doing God's work. So there is many people want to support innovative, good project in Pakistan and other places. So there are so many people with good heart, but you have to be data driven, you have to be metrics. And as you can produce data, they want to support because there are so many very, very successful billionaires, including Bill Gates, that will support. And Murad, you know through your wife's and connections to the Gates Foundation, so there is amazing potential if you can package. And again, this is the packaging of an idea as an entrepreneur. How do you package that idea, what you want to do in architecture for this thing? And I always want people to think that there is a gentleman in Pakistan who is working on deaf kids, an American who's been there for 30 years. And we as a family support that program. But Richard Gary I said, whatever he has come up with a 5,000 word dictionary for deaf people. Pakistan did not have a language. So every deaf family had their own language. When they go to a hospital, they cannot describe pain and all these things. So innovative work on, he got support from other foundations. But I says, Richard, look at not just Pakistan, look at other poor countries where the deaf kids may need it. So when you come up with housing, innovative things, look at a larger region. And then people may be saying, oh, we're trying it. Let's giving it some seed funding to see how can you take the idea from idea to a prototype to a small volume to a large volume. Farad, there was a person next to you. She had a question also, maybe. But there are other questions. I think growing business has challenges at different stages, from startup to your first million to first 10. So you can see stages, and the complexity increases, especially if you're in the hardware business. So we were fortunate that we were learning on the job. So it was really, and one of the challenges, Yaruk, I saw that when we reach a certain size, none of us had built. So we were hiring executives from very large companies. The interesting thing is, somebody from IBM or Apple and another company, they brought their own culture. And we became kind of dysfunctional for a while. So those are the challenges. of when you reach a certain scale. But if you look at it today in America, some of the leading tech companies are run by executives who are born in India. So in that way, America is more open than Japan, than Germany, or any other part of the world. So I sometimes say jokingly, sometimes seriously, that I cannot live in any other country. I will be in Pakistan or America. I could not live in Middle East. I could not live in UK because the Britishers have a way to put you down in such a subtle way that I said something that was not right. So I think America has its huge challenges, but it is kind of very dynamic where things are breaking, new things are forming all the time. This is kind of my kind of daily meditation book. This guy looking at wisdom from Roman philosophers. This is called the Daily Stoic. So I can open it up and I can read you for August 22nd. It has a daily advice. So I'll just kind of read what it said. So this for 22nd of August, which is here today, it says something very interesting. It says, it is essential for you to remember that the attention you give should be to proportion. So we worry about too many things. He says, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. But yesterday it says, don't be miserable in advance. So many times we start worrying about things before something has happened. So yeah. So I look at history, I look at biology, I look at. So this is a very young man. So I don't know how self-help category is very, very big in America. I do not know about Pakistan. So I try to read, Murad, what my sons are watching and listening. And this is a British young doctor. I don't know if any of you have heard of him or not. Uh, So it's an amazing book, and I have not yet finished it. I just picked it up from the bookstore. He has a very popular podcast, and some of the very bright young boys, primarily in America, are listening to him. So I picked up this book because the young boys were reading it. I said I should read it, what they are reading. So Murad, as I said, that my interest in religion is really from the Rumi side, and I've had a chance to go visit Turkey many, many years ago with the Sufi group that I belong to. Now, it may sound heretic in Pakistan, but in this Sufi couple, they are both Americans, husband and wife. They came to Islam a long time ago, and I was going to find this. Um, this is a book that years ago, and the publisher asked them to republish. And yeah, Helminski's. And his wife is also a very good writer. This is um, his wife's book, Camille Helminski. So, but if you listen to his wife's Kirat, it is beautiful. And in larger Sufi gathering, I pray behind everybody else. I think any other person, especially young person, is more pious than I am. So I like to follow, I do not lead. And in these settings, a few times, his wife has led the prayer. And to me, anybody who is pious, this thing. So I look at kind of a broader humanity of like looking at it. But the most interesting thing in Anita and I went to a very short trip with the Sufi group to Turkey, and then we had to come. So when we went to Konya, where Rumi is Maqbara is there, at the airport, we had never been there. We are getting some coffee. So the guy making the coffee, Turkish young man, asked me, and I said, "Oh, I am from Pakistan. My wife is from Japan." This guy said, "Iqbal." So the average coffee maker in Turkey knew about Allama Iqbal. I was just amazed. You're absolutely right. I saw that stone in the back. So as I walked around the whole place, you can see. And if I had a chance, and Murad, this is something that I do not think so. So 2038 would be 100-year anniversary of Iqbal. Today, Rumi is the most read poet in the West. And I had talked to some people about 10, 15 to present Iqbal as Rumi of the 20th century. Rumi is 800 years old. Take his poetry because he talked about justice. He talked about some very important issues, cutting edge issues. But it is a big project because my way of introducing Pakistan as this thing is through Iqbal. Some of you, I'm sure all of you are enjoying mangoes in Pakistan. We are luckily getting mangoes in California from Pakistan. So I go visit, मैंने कहा I don't have any other good news from Pakistan, but मैं आम लेके आ गया हूँ आपके लिए. तो I'm using calling it mango diplomacy. तो मैंने अपनी बीवी से कहा कि मेरा नाम आजकल आम वाला है. I think so the biggest, most important thing I have learned about humans is that we are primarily emotional. We may talk about reason. So the highest, most educated person will hide their emotions around reasoning and logic. But primarily humans are emotional. And recognizing that, again, a Sufi way of looking, things will pass. So we lose family member, we lose these things, but they are temporary setbacks. So when I look at I look at religious people, I says any religious person by the nature of religion is an optimist, because we look at this as a movement. We don't look at this as the end of the thing. So it is the healing function is part of humanity. So if you look at humans from an evolutionary point of view, if we became down, we would not be able to survive as this human race. Very interesting things about humans is that in every family I found, आपने आप लोग देख लें, some people are very sensitive to sleep, some people go to bed early, wake up early, some people go to bed very late, wake up late. And the biological reason is for a tribe, you are in feature of danger. So you have some people who are sleeping, but some people are very light sleepers. So if you look at just the world around us and our thing, you have got amazing insight about how we evolve and how we look at it. And I look at it, the biggest challenge for human is our growth happened when humans figure out how to manage fire. तो आप फायर की आग की हिस्ट्री देखें तो in South Africa there are caves where you can find big animals have eaten humans, and then you have this layer, and once humans got control of fire, then we started eating them. We could protect from animals and everything. So the biggest innovation in human history was fire. So if you look at it, our brains grew. So our brains has got 87 billion neurons. And if you look at our intestine is 1/3 shorter than a chimpanzee, because the chimpanzees are still eating raw material. So with cooked food, we get much more calories into a thing. 20% of our energy goes keeping our brain running, glucose. So, but I see one of the real problems of today is that our brain is too big for most of our jobs. So it goes into depression, it goes into addiction, it goes into different emotions. So if you look at Sare Mazhab aaye, meditation aaye, how do we manage our big brain before it goes out of sync? We are taking medication. So one of the data that I have is from the highest universities in the US. 40% of the students are on some kind of medication to manage their mental health. 40%. Because it's a hyper competitive environment. So we are putting ourselves into so many challenging things, and we have this big brain that does not want to stay still. So aap likhenge zikr karna hua, meditation, all of that mazhab aaya to manage this brain, because it never stops. It's constantly running. I think there is tremendous pressure. बच्चों पे, यहाँ पे, where the city where I live, there is hyper pressure on young kids to do this. If they come from a well-off family, they've got tutors, class के बाद. So we are not letting kids be kids. So I see this hyper pressure to succeed, because we are also comparing. I see a dark side to that material success, material focus. And that's where I see the downside of capitalism and how our needs get manipulated. Yeah. I think जो आपका perspective है, that same debate is going on in every major society, every major country. So philosophers, theorists, humanists are wrestling with that issue. There are some examples from the history. तो अगर आप 150 साल पहले जाएं, अमेरिका के अंदर majority of the people were farmers. इस वक्त अमेरिका में सिर्फ 2% लोग हैं जो फार्मिंग पे हैं. So they went through a period where mechanization, tractors and everything, more automation, but they are able to produce more. So new jobs were created. Then the ultimate question is, with AI can do 95% of the stuff. So there are some theories that in the societies, you would be able to create enough wealth, basic resources, food, and living spaces, that there is a discussion about universal income in certain Western countries. कि हर citizen को आपने इतने डॉलर या इतने रुपए या इतने रियाल दिए for basic needs, कि भाई you have a space to live and food to these things. So those debates are going on. I don't have the answer, but none of us would be able to stop it. So just like genetic modification, these things, genetic engineering, they're trying to create guardrails for genetic engineering. In China, they did something, those scientists were barred because they were playing with the human embryo. So every technology has a dark side, including genetics, by this thing, creating superhumans. So today, well-off people can have modified genes and predict कि भाई उनके बच्चों में क्या बीमारी होगी, क्या नहीं होगी. And this is happening, and within 10-15 years you will have more of these things. Designer babies पैदा होंगे कि ये color चाहिए, है ना? So those are tough moral issues. I believe कि fighting poverty and what China has done and all these things, we focus on these things. And one of the things what I tell people जो कि पाकिस्तान में social project कर रहे हैं, कि भाई मैंने कहा कि we train our people to be able to support second level, third level support for nursing shortage in Japan and in Germany. So some of my friends who are in social, मैंने कहा यार, don't just teach kids in Pakistan English. Ask them to run Russian, Chinese, Japanese, German, all those countries. So when I was young, nobody ever talked about population shrinking. The birth rate, when I was young, the world will explode. So right now, the world will go to about 9.5 billion, 10 billion, then it start declining. In Japan has been declining for 15 years, and they have no answer for that. South Korea is declining. Singapore is declining. Italy. So if you look at it, so the population mix, the young people mix, all that is changing. That was never predicted. In Singapore, they encourage money for having extra babies. The young couples are not buying any of those logic. But see, so to me, if you again, I am constantly reading. So one of the key things that Bangladesh did many decades ago, that K to 5, पांचवी जमात तक बांग्लादेश में टीचर जो हैं सिर्फ औरतें हैं, because they are more nurturing. So even in America, a male teacher can beat, punish very tough on male and female students. So they are the only country that I know that said, first till पांचवी जमात तक टीचर सिर्फ औरतें होंगी. And their literacy rate is much higher than Pakistan. Some simple techniques. So within my family, my wife believes a lot in extraterrestrial, and the other sources came, and we're looking at these old pyramids. and looking at all these things. For whatever reason, those assumptions, those claims have not really connected with me as much because UFOs visiting, DNA. So if there are, I think maybe within this century we'll find more of the mysteries of the past. I'm fascinated by this book. So this book has a 350-year-old discussion between a Native American Indian, his name is Candy Rock, and a French journal. And he is looking at 350 years ago, poverty in the Americas. And this Native American goes to Paris. वहां पे उसको फकीर दिखाई देते हैं सड़क पे कहता है you guys call yourself advanced. In those days, the Native American society was much more egalitarian. They did not have any individual ownership of land. Everything was community. Women had much more rights compared to the West at that time. This is the discussion dialogue in this book. I'd never heard of this thing. So it's fascinating insight into different societies and the data that we can see. So I wish I could elaborate more about what interesting things, amazing things could have happened. But I've never been to Egypt. I was only focused on pyramids, but then some of my friends who have been there, the Egyptians were way advanced in different kind of surgeries, different kind of things. So you cannot run a large empire without very, very skillful managers and things like that. But I wish I could expand on it, but I do not know. Raj, you just visited Babar Ali and a gentleman that we all admire what he has built in the same challenging environment, Lums. So we have some very fine examples of amazing individuals in Pakistan who at age 97 are still active. Their brains are active. So I believe that आखिरत आने वाली है, ये होगा, वो होगा. I have not connected with any of those ideas. I see there are so many good people, and the future tomorrow is going to be better than today. And if not tomorrow, day after tomorrow, or next year. So to me, that gets me a reason to get up. And I believe in the younger people. As I mentioned, I'm living in overtime, but I feel amazingly bright people around the world. And I'll just share one data that when I was young, in the 70s, maybe there was 1,000 bright graduates with PhDs in sciences coming from Oxford, Cambridge, MIT. Murad and all of you, I believe today there are 10,000 people coming each year from China, Brazil, India. These are all bright minds. They're not going to sit still. They will look at the climate challenge and the food supply challenge and the virus challenge, and they are going to be coming up with amazing breakthroughs. They will use AI for drug discovery. We have got these things. So I am extremely optimistic about what these young people will be doing with the opportunities they will get, to connecting them with the world at large. I'm very, very hopeful. I will not be here, but it doesn't matter. We have to keep planting seeds. And when people ask me, I say, I want to plant as many ideas with young people. If the idea doesn't develop, maybe the seed was not good or the time was not right. The idea develops, I'm not here, it doesn't matter. That's the way the world moves on. So best of luck. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And keep sending me any questions, Yaqub. I'm an email away, a phone call away. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.